Consider the stories you have heard, or perhaps lived, of someone who changed completely. The alcoholic who woke one morning simply done with drinking and never went back. The cynical intellectual who read a single passage and was overwhelmed by a certainty of God's presence that reorganized his entire life. The person who survived a near-death experience and returned so altered that their family felt they were living with a different person. The soldier who came home and found that the person who had left no longer existed. These are what William James called conversion experiences, and he devoted the most searching psychological analysis of his career to understanding what happens in them. James began with a model of the self that made conversion comprehensible. He described consciousness as having a center, what he called the hot place or habitual center of energy. This is the nucleus around which a person's concerns are organized, the set of values and commitments that give their life its characteristic direction. Most of what passes through consciousness is evaluated in relation to this center. Some things feel central, others feel peripheral. The center determines what the person finds important, what troubles them, what gives them satisfaction. In ordinary psychological life, the hot place shifts slowly. Priorities gradually change, values gradually evolve. The person you are at 40 differs from the person you were at 20, but the differences accumulated gradually, each step small and barely perceptible. Conversion is the sudden, dramatic shift of the habitual center, a reorganization of the entire self that happens not gradually but in a moment, or over hours or days, with a quality of irreversibility and totality that distinguishes it from ordinary change. James collected hundreds of conversion accounts and identified two broad patterns. The first he called the volitional type, conversions that come at the end of a period of deliberate moral and spiritual effort. The person has been working at change, striving, trying, and finally something gives way and the transformation arrives. The effort was the preparation. The conversion was the delivery of what the effort had been building toward. The second, more dramatic type he called the self-surrender type. Conversions that come not through effort but through its opposite, through the exhaustion and abandonment of the striving self. The person reaches a point of complete breakdown, surrenders the attempt to resolve their situation through will, and in the moment of surrender finds that the resolution arrives from outside the will. These cases are the most psychologically striking because they follow a pattern that seems paradoxical. Trying harder produces no result, giving up produces transformation. James explained this apparent paradox through his concept of the subliminal self. He argued that in many conversion cases, the transformation had been in preparation long before the conscious self was aware of it. Below the threshold of consciousness, the psyche had been reorganizing, working on the irreconcilable tensions the conscious self was struggling with, building toward a new equilibrium. When the conscious self finally gave up its desperate attempts to solve the problem, the barriers to the subliminal's prepared resolution fell away, and the transformation erupted into consciousness with the force of revelation. This is why conversion experiences so often carry the quality of givenness, of arriving rather than being made. The person does not feel that they have decided to change. They feel that the change happened to them, that something came from outside the ordinary self. James took this phenomenology seriously without requiring supernatural explanation. What arrived from outside the ordinary self was the self's own subliminal activity, its own deeper intelligence, finally able to break through. James also noted the extraordinary durability of genuine conversions. The person who has undergone one typically cannot be argued back into their former state. The shift in the hot place is not merely cognitive, it is constitutional. The new center holds because it has been built by the full depth of the person's psychological life, not just their conscious decision-making. Contemporary research on psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy has produced striking parallels to the conversion experiences James described. Therapists report that certain sessions produce rapid, durable personality transformations, reductions in entrenched anxiety, addiction, or depression, that share the same quality of sudden reorganization, the same sense of things falling into place, the same irreversibility that James's conversion cases displayed. The mechanism appears to involve a temporary dissolution of habitual self-structures, followed by reorganization around new or rediscovered centers of meaning and value. James would not be surprised. He understood conversion not as a religious anomaly but as an extreme instance of a universal psychological process, the reorganization of the self around a new center of energy and value. This process can be triggered by religious crisis, by loss, by encounter with beauty, by the forced confrontation with mortality, by the exhaustion of old ways of being. What it requires, in every case, is the failure of the old organization and the willingness, conscious or otherwise, to let something new take its place. The psychology of conversion is ultimately the psychology of genuine change, Not the shallow behavior modification that self-help culture often promotes, but the deep reorganization of who a person fundamentally is. James gave us a framework for understanding why some people change and others do not, and what the experience of genuine transformation actually looks and feels like from the inside. Subscribe to The Psychology of William James to explore more of his timeless ideas.